A young billionaire ignores a child shivering in the cold at a traffic light, but when he reads the card she hands him, he breaks down in tears. Ethan Carter straightened his silk tie as he looked out the window of his penthouse apartment. The view of New York City at night was a dazzling display of lights worth millions, but it no longer stirred anything in him. His eyes swept over the illuminated skyscrapers as if he were looking at a run-of-the-mill wallpaper. "Sir, the car is ready," announced Marcus, his driver, over the intercom. "I'm on my way down," he replied without enthusiasm. Another evening, another event. Ethan checked his watch, a Swiss piece that cost more than many of his employees earned in a year. He had exactly 20 minutes to make it to the launch of a startup his company had just acquired. He wasn't running late. He never was. Punctuality was one of the many rules he imposed on himself. In the mirrored elevator, he studied his reflection, an impeccable suit, perfectly styled hair, erect posture. At 34, Ethan was the embodiment of success. His tech company had grown exponentially over the past 5 years, earning him a spot on the list of the nation's most influential young billionaires. Business magazines featured his face, calling him a genius, a visionary, an innovator, words that rang more hollow each day. The building's lobby was a parade of marble and glass. The doorman greeted him with respect, almost reverence. Ethan returned the greeting with a brief nod, without really seeing the man standing before him. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," said Marcus, opening the door to the imported car. Ethan slid into the back seat, immediately picking up his phone. Dozens of unread emails, multiple messages from executives and business partners. His life summarized in notifications. "To Park Avenue," he instructed, though Marcus already knew the destination. While the car wove through the city, Ethan automatically responded to messages. He was efficient, precise, like a perfectly programmed machine. Occasionally, he looked out the window, watching the city go by without truly seeing it. They stopped at a traffic light. There was heavy traffic, even at that hour. Luxury cars next to worn-out vehicles. New York did not discriminate in its traffic jams. A movement at the window caught his attention, a gentle tapping on the glass. Ethan frowned, irritated by the interruption. With a sigh, he lowered the window slightly. "Sorry, kid, I don't have any cash," he said automatically, eyes still on his phone. "I don't want money," came a child's voice. Ethan lifted his gaze to find the face of a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 9. Dark, messy hair, worn-out clothes, but her eyes were intensely alive. In her small, grimy hands, she held out a homemade card. "Please," she said, extending the card, "just read it." There was something in that request, a simplicity, a contained urgency that made Ethan accept the card without thinking. He took it mechanically, like someone receiving a random flyer on the street. "Lights green, sir," Marcus notified him. Ethan slipped the card into his jacket pocket without looking at it and gestured for the driver to move on. In the rear-view mirror, for just a fraction of a second, he saw the girl standing in the same spot, watching the car drive away. Something about that image bothered him, but he pushed the feeling aside. He had an event to attend, people to impress, deals to close. The launch went as they always did. Elaborate speeches, rehearsed applause, expensive champagne in crystal flutes. Ethan circulated the venue, shaking hands, smiling when required, signing preliminary contracts. His name was mentioned with admiration, his presence treated as an honor. "Ethan Carter in person," said an investor, as if encountering a celebrity. "Your latest app is revolutionary. How do you always stay ahead?" Ethan gave the answer everyone expected. It's all about never being satisfied with the present and constantly envisioning the future. Sound bites. His life was full of them. Polished lines rehearsed in front of a mirror until they sounded natural. The investor smiled, impressed, not perceiving the emptiness behind the words. After 2 hours of forced networking, Ethan felt his energy drain away. He had fulfilled his role. No one would notice if he left now. "Marcus, I'm heading out. Meet me at the entrance." The cold night air was a momentary relief. While waiting for the car, Ethan adjusted his coat and felt something in his pocket. The card. He had completely forgotten about it. For a moment, he considered throwing it away without reading. It was probably just another plea for help, something his charitable assistants could handle. But something, maybe boredom, maybe a rare spark of curiosity, prompted him to pull out the small card. It was simple, handmade on a piece of repurposed cardboard. In shaky, childlike handwriting, it contained only one sentence. "Please help me. I have nowhere else to go and all I want is a chance to start over." A sudden tightness gripped Ethan's chest. The simplicity of the message struck him like a punch. There was no embellishment, no fabricated story for pity, no emotional manipulation, just a direct plea, raw in its honesty. The car arrived, and Ethan climbed in, still holding the card. "Home," he said distractedly. During the ride, he couldn't put the card down. He reread the message, recalling the girl's eyes. There had been something in them, a determination, a dignity that clashed with her ragged clothes. "Marcus, did you see that girl at the traffic light? The one who gave me this?" The driver adjusted the rearview mirror to look at Ethan. "Yes, sir. She's often at that intersection. I've seen her before." Do you know who she is? Where she comes from?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't know the details, sir. But from what other drivers say, she lost her mother recently. Seems she has no other relatives." Ethan fell silent, processing the information. A child alone on the streets of New York. It wasn't uncommon. He knew that. The city had thousands of homeless children, statistics he'd encountered in his company's social responsibility meetings. But now it wasn't just a statistic. It was a specific girl with bright eyes and a handmade card. The car pulled up in front of his building. Ethan got out absent-mindedly, still clutching the card. "Have a good night, sir," Marcus said in farewell. "Good night," Ethan replied, without truly registering it. In his silent, perfectly organized apartment, Ethan removed his jacket and loosened his tie. He poured himself an expensive whiskey and walked to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled beneath him. Somewhere down there, he thought, that girl was probably trying to find a place to sleep. "She's not your responsibility," he said aloud to the empty apartment. He tried to distract himself. He opened his laptop, checked his company's stock prices, reviewed reports. But the image of the girl at the traffic light persisted, along with the words on the card. "Please help me. I have nowhere else to go, and all I want is a chance to start over." Start over. The word echoed in his mind. How many times had Ethan spoken about fresh starts in his motivational talks? "Innovation is the art of starting over," he used to say. Empty words from someone who had never really needed to start from nothing. He left his whiskey untouched and headed to the closet. In one corner, neatly arranged in boxes, were items he periodically donated to charitable organizations: lightly worn clothes, electronic devices replaced by newer versions, objects he'd bought on impulse but never really used. Charity at a distance. Comfortable. No real involvement. He went to bed and tried to sleep, but the card's words haunted him. He tossed and turned, more restless than he had felt in years. His mind, usually occupied with market strategies and tech innovations, was now fixated on the image of a little girl at a traffic light. At 3 a.m, he gave up on sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his tired face. He picked up his phone and opened a news app, looking for distractions. Headlines about the economy, politics, technology, his usual world. And then, as if fate was taunting him, a small headline. "Number of homeless children rises 30% in the city." He tossed his phone aside. He walked around the silent apartment, feeling strangely out of place in his own home. The white walls, designer furniture, carefully selected artwork, it all felt like it belonged to someone else. He returned to the window. The city was starting to wake with the first hints of dawn. Early morning drivers, night shift workers heading home, homeless people waking in their makeshift shelters. "She's not my responsibility," he repeated, weaker this time. But something had changed. The words on the card had found a crack in the armor he had so carefully built around himself. Beneath all the layers of success, ambition, and self-control, there was a persistent emptiness, a feeling that despite everything he'd achieved, something essential was missing. He went back to his bedside table and picked up the card. He looked at the childlike handwriting, tracing the outlines of the letters with his finger. "A chance to start over," he whispered. In that moment, something broke inside Ethan Carter. It wasn't a grand revelation or a dramatic epiphany, just the slow, painful admission that, despite all his wealth and power, he couldn't remember the last time he'd genuinely helped someone without calculating the benefits to himself. He sat in the armchair by his bedroom window, watching the sunrise with the card in his hand. By the time the sun finally rose over the horizon, Ethan already knew what he had to do, not out of social obligation or for PR image. For the first time in years, something outside of business had completely captured his attention, and no matter how much he tried to deny it, he knew he wouldn't be able to move on unless he at least tried to find that girl again. The next morning, Ethan cancelled all his meetings, something he had never done before. Claire, his assistant, nearly choked when she got the call. "Cancel everything. Ethan, are you sick?" "No, I just need to handle a personal matter." There was silence on the other end of the line. In 5 years working together, personal matter had never been an acceptable excuse. "Are you sure? The meeting with the Japanese investor? Reschedule it for next week. Tell them an emergency came up." He hung up before she could protest further. He put on jeans and a simple t-shirt, clothes he rarely wore, and grabbed his car keys. "You're driving yourself today, sir?" asked the doorman, surprised to see him leaving without his driver. "Yes, Jorge. I need flexibility." He drove to the intersection where he had encountered the girl the previous night. He found a nearby parking spot and waited, watching the traffic. The light changed colors repeatedly. Street vendors offered water, candy, flowers, no sign of the little girl. After 2 hours, he decided to be more proactive. He approached a man selling bottled water from what looked like a fixed spot on that corner. "Excuse me," Ethan tried to sound casual. "I'm looking for a girl who usually stands at this intersection. Dark hair, about 9 years old." The man eyed him warily. "Why do you want to know?" Ethan hadn't considered how his question might sound. An adult man looking for a child he didn't know. "She gave me this yesterday." He showed the card. "I want to help her." The vendor examined the card, and his expression softened. "Oh, that's Sophie," he said at last. "She shows up here sometimes, but never at the same time. She's clever, that one. She doesn't trust people easily." Sophie. Now the girl had a name. "Do you know where I can find her?" The man hesitated. "Look, I'm not sure I should say anything. There are a lot of bad people out there, you know. I understand your concern." Ethan pulled out his wallet and offered some bills. "But I really want to help her." The vendor waved away the money. "No need for that. If you truly want to help her, try the park a couple of blocks away. She hangs around there when she's not by the traffic lights." Ethan thanked him and walked to the park. It was a simple space with some trees, worn benches, and a small playground. Children were playing under the watchful eyes of parents and nannies. Seniors were playing checkers at concrete tables. No sign of Sophie. He sat on a bench, feeling out of place. His phone kept vibrating with messages and emails he ignored. Another first for him. An older woman feeding pigeons on the nearby bench observed him curiously. "Are you looking for someone?" she finally asked. "A girl named Sophie," he replied, surprising even himself with his honesty. Dark hair, skinny, around 9 years old. The woman's eyes lit up in recognition. "Little Sophie, poor thing. You know her. I come here every day. She shows up sometimes, always alone. After her mother died, it's like a bird that lost its nest." The confirmation of her story made Ethan's heart clench. "Do you know what happened to her mother?" "An illness. Cancer, from what I heard." She fought it for a long time but didn't have money for proper treatment. Sophie would wait here while her mother did cleaning jobs in the neighborhood. No other relatives? The woman shook her head. Social services tried to find some, but no luck. They took her to a shelter, but she always runs away. Says it's too crowded, that the older kids scare her. Ethan absorbed the information, feeling a growing anger at a system that let a child prefer the streets over a supposedly safe shelter. Where does she sleep? She won't tell anyone. She's smart, knows how to protect herself. But if you want my advice, come back in the late afternoon. She usually stops by the sandwich cart before it closes for the day. Ethan thanked her and spent the rest of the day walking around the neighborhood, showing Sophie's card to local shop owners. Some recognized her, others looked away, uncomfortable being reminded of a poverty they'd rather ignore. A bookstore owner said Sophie sometimes came in to browse children's books. She never touches anything without permission, he said, unlike a lot of wealthy kids who come here. A fruit vendor mentioned giving her slightly bruised apples. She's always grateful, that girl. She's polite. Each piece of information built a clearer picture. Sophie wasn't just another statistic of abandonment. She was a real child, with a personality, habits, a story. In the late afternoon, Ethan returned to the park. He stayed at a discreet distance from the sandwich cart, waiting. When business slowed down and the owner began packing up, he noticed a small figure cautiously approaching. It was her. Even from afar, he recognized the dark hair and alert posture, like a wild animal always on guard. Sophie spoke briefly with the cart owner, who smiled and handed her a wrapped sandwich. She thanked him and turned to leave, then noticed Ethan. Her eyes widened in recognition, and for a moment, she looked ready to run. Ethan raised his hands to show he meant no harm and took a few steps toward her. She hesitated, clearly deciding whether or not to flee. "Sophie," he called softly. She studied him warily. "How do you know my name?" "I asked around. You gave me this card yesterday." He saw surprise in her eyes, as if she hadn't expected anyone to care enough to look for her. "Why are you looking for me?" she asked, her voice a mixture of distrust and a faint, almost imperceptible hope. Ethan realized he didn't have a rehearsed answer. Why was he here? What did he expect to accomplish? "I wanted to see if I could help," he finally said, with the honesty that surprised even himself. Sophie observed him for a few moments more, her gaze far older than her years. "Nobody helps for free," she replied, her small voice carrying a bitterness far too heavy for a child her age. Ethan felt those words like a punch to the gut. In his world, everything had a price, a return. She was right to question his intentions. "How about we start with dinner?" he suggested. "No strings attached. Then you decide whether you want my help or not." Sophie clutched the sandwich to her chest, weighing his offer. Finally, she nodded. "All right, but somewhere public." An involuntary smile spread across Ethan's face. This child had more sense than many adults he knew. "Of course. You pick the place." Original text repeated paragraph. Translation remains consistent with the instructions to keep numbering and paragraphs intact. The next paragraph is the repeat from the user's text. We continue accordingly. The next morning, Ethan cancelled all his meetings, something he had never done before. Claire, his assistant, nearly choked when she got the call. "I cancel everything. Ethan, are you sick?" "No, I just need to handle a personal matter." There was silence on the other end of the line. In 5 years working together, personal matter had never been an acceptable excuse. "Are you sure? The meeting with the Japanese investors? Reschedule it for next week. Tell them an emergency came up." He hung up before she could protest further. He put on jeans and a simple t-shirt, clothes he rarely wore, and grabbed his car keys. "You're driving yourself today, sir?" asked the doorman, surprised to see him leaving without his driver. "Yes, Jorge. I need flexibility." He drove to the intersection where he had encountered the girl the previous night. He found a nearby parking spot and waited, watching the traffic. The light changed repeatedly. Street vendors offered water, candy, flowers. No sign of the little girl. After 2 hours, he decided to be more proactive. He approached a man selling bottled water who seemed to have a fixed spot. "Excuse me," Ethan tried to sound casual. "I'm looking for a girl who usually stands at this intersection. Dark hair, about 9 years old." The man eyed him warily. "Why do you want to know?" Ethan hadn't considered how his question might sound. An adult man looking for a child he didn't know. "She gave me this yesterday." He showed the card. "I want to help her." The vendor examined the card and his expression softened. "Oh, that's Sophie," he finally said. "She shows up here sometimes, but never on a schedule. She's a smart kid, doesn't trust people easily." Sophie. Now the girl had a name. "Do you know where I can find her?" The man hesitated. "Look, I'm not sure I should say anything. A lot of bad folks around, you know." "I understand." Ethan pulled out his wallet and offered a few bills. "But I really want to help her." The vendor declined the money with a gesture. "No need. If you really want to help the kid, try the park 2 blocks from here. She usually spends time there when she's not at the lights." Ethan thanked him and headed to the park. It was a simple space with some trees, worn benches, and a small playground. Children ran around under the supervision of moms and babysitters. Older folks played checkers at concrete tables. No sign of Sophie. He sat on a bench and waited, feeling out of place. His phone kept buzzing with messages and emails he ignored. Another first. An older woman feeding pigeons on a nearby bench watched him curiously. "Looking for someone?" she finally asked. "A girl named Sophie," he replied, surprised at his own candor. "Dark hair, skinny, about 9. The woman's eyes lit up in recognition. "Little Sophie. I used to see her here often, but it's been a few days now." "Do you know anything about her?" The woman shrugged. "Not much. She's a reserved child. I know she has nowhere to stay, from what I understand. I've tried to talk to her a few times, offer some help, but it's hard to earn her trust." "What about social services? Doesn't anyone do something?" "Oh, son," the woman sighed. "There are so many children on the streets. The system can't handle it all. They say they tried to take her to a shelter, but she always runs away." Ethan thanked her for the information and continued his search. He spent the rest of the day walking around the neighborhood, showing a quick photo he'd managed to snap of Sophie from the traffic light. A bookstore owner recognized Sophie. "She comes in sometimes, just to look at the children's books. Never touches anything without permission. Well-mannered, unlike some rich kids who come in." A fruit seller also knew her. "Sometimes I give her apples that are a bit bruised. She always thanks me." A diner waiter said Sophie sometimes appeared at lunchtime. "She just stares through the window. If there's extra food, I offer it to her. She never asks, you know, only thanks if we give something." Each piece of information only strengthened his resolve. Sophie wasn't just another abandoned statistic. She was a real person with her own personality and habits. Late in the afternoon, Ethan returned to the park and waited near the sandwich cart. The owner recognized him from his earlier questions. "Still looking for little Sophie?" the man asked as he packed up. "Yes, people said she might come here." The man nodded. "Usually, yes, but not today. I already prepared a sandwich for her if she shows up." He showed a wrapped package with care. "Is it all right if I wait?" "Sure, but I can't guarantee she'll come. She's unpredictable, like most homeless kids. She learned not to follow a routine. It's safer that way." Ethan waited until nightfall, but Sophie didn't show. He returned the next day and the next, always the same intersection, the same park. Nothing. It was as if she had disappeared. On the 4th day, Claire called, worried. "Ethan, what's going on? The investors are getting impatient. You've never been away this long." "I'm working on something important," he answered vaguely. "More important than your company?" The question caught him off guard. A week ago, he would have answered without hesitation that nothing was more important than his company. Now he wasn't so sure. "I just need a few more days," he finally said. He continued his search, expanding the area. He visited shelters, showed Sophie's photo. No one had seen her recently. A week passed. Exhausted and frustrated, Ethan stopped by a cafe to grab some coffee. He felt defeated. Maybe it was time to accept he wouldn't find the girl, that his sudden impulse to help someone would have to remain just an unfulfilled intention. While paying the bill, he overheard a conversation at the next table. Sleeping under the awning of that abandoned store on Sunflower Street, a girl so small, all alone. I called social services, but by the time they arrived, she was gone. Ethan froze, listening to every word. What did she look like? He asked, turning to face the table. The woman looked surprised at his intrusion. Oh, maybe 9 or 10. Dark hair, really skinny. Why? Sophie, he murmured. That must be Sophie. He left in a hurry, ignoring the puzzled looks. Sunflower Street was only a few blocks away. If Sophie was hiding in that area, maybe he still had a chance to find her. As he drove, a mix of anxiety and hope churned inside him. Why was he so obsessed with finding this one particular child? There were thousands of children in the city who needed help. What made Sophie different? He had no answer. He only knew that since reading that simple plea on the card, something had changed within him. He had to find her. He had to try helping. Even if it was just to prove to himself he could still feel something beyond ambition and boredom. When he reached Sunflower Street, the sun was already setting. The abandoned store was easy to spot. Broken windows, a dilapidated facade, a sad symbol of urban decay. He looked around, searching for any sign of Sophie, but the street was deserted. Resigned, he decided he'd return the next day. Something told him he was close to finding her, and for the first time in years, Ethan Carter felt he was doing something truly important. Ethan returned to Sunflower Street at first light the following morning. The place looked even more forlorn in the morning sun, peeling paint, trash piled on the sidewalks, a stark contrast to the upscale neighborhoods he usually frequented. He parked his car and walked around the abandoned building. He hesitated before circling it, scanning under the awning as the woman in the cafe had mentioned. With every step, questions he had no answers for filled his mind. Why couldn't he just forget this girl? Why had her story affected him so deeply when he heard sad stories all the time? Rounding the corner, he saw the awning and beneath it, a small huddled figure. His heart pounded. It was her, Sophie, sleeping on folded cardboard, using an old backpack as a pillow. Such a common sight in the city that most people walked by without noticing. But now in front of his eyes, it felt like an open wound in the reality he knew. He approached quietly, unsure how to proceed. Waking her might frighten her. Waiting nearby might also seem threatening. He opted to sit a safe distance away on a nearby step and wait. He didn't have to wait long. As if sensing someone's presence, Sophie woke with a start, sitting up abruptly. Her gaze swept the surroundings until it landed on Ethan. Recognition came immediately, followed by clear distrust. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice still hoarse from sleep, but her eyes fully alert. "I've been looking for you everywhere," he said honestly. "I heard someone mention a girl sleeping here." Sophie stood up quickly, gathering her few possessions with the skill of someone used to running. "Why are you looking for me? What do you want?" Ethan caught the fear in her voice. For a homeless child, a stranger was rarely good news. "Your card," he said, pulling it from his pocket. "You asked for help. I'm here to offer it." Sophie paused, staring at the small card in his hands. For a moment, she seemed surprised, as though she hadn't expected anyone to be moved by her words. "I hand out a lot of those," she admitted. "No one ever comes back." The simplicity of her confession hit Ethan hard. How many times had she asked for help, only to be ignored? How many people, like he almost had, took the card and never bothered to read it? "I'm hungry," Ethan said suddenly. "Know any good place for breakfast around here?" The abrupt change of subject caught Sophie off guard. She hesitated, studying him as if trying to decipher his real intentions. "There's a bakery on the corner," she replied at last. "The owner sometimes gives me yesterday's bread. Would you like to join me?" "My treat," Sophie clutched her backpack, clearly sizing up the risks. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to help, and because I'm also hungry." After a few seconds that felt eternal. Sophie nodded. "Fine, but in the bakery, a public place." Ethan smiled, admiring her caution. "Sure. You lead the way." The bakery was a simple establishment, but clean and welcoming. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. The owner, a middle-aged woman, widened her eyes upon seeing Sophie enter, accompanied by a well-dressed man. "Sophie, what a surprise to see you coming in through the front door," the woman teased kindly. "He invited me," Sophie explained, pointing at Ethan. The woman studied him with barely disguised suspicion. Ethan felt her scrutiny and, oddly, was grateful for it. It was good to know someone was looking out for Sophie, even from a distance. "Can we sit here?" he asked, indicating a table near the window. The owner nodded, still watchful. "I'll bring the menu." Sophie perched on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt at any sign of danger. Ethan tried to appear as casual as possible. "What do you recommend here?" "The cheese bread is good," she replied hesitantly, "and the hot chocolate." When the owner returned, Ethan ordered 2 complete breakfasts, everything the bakery offered. Sophie's eyes widened, but she didn't object. "So," Ethan began, trying to start a conversation, "how long have you been on the streets?" Sophie looked away, suddenly fascinated by the tablecloth. "A few months," she answered vaguely. The food arrived: eggs, bread, cheese, fruit, juice, coffee for Ethan, hot chocolate for Sophie. Her eyes shone at the sight of so much food, but she held herself back, eating slowly, with manners surprisingly polite for someone in her situation. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," Ethan said, noticing her discomfort. "I just want to help if you'll let me." Sophie studied him over her cup of chocolate. "Why?" "You don't even know me." It was a fair question. Why was he, a man who spent his life calculating gains and losses, so determined to help a stranger's child? "Your card," he answered candidly. "What you wrote made me think. Made me realize maybe I could do something other than just follow my routine." Sophie continued eating in silence, apparently considering his words. By the time she finished, she seemed a bit more relaxed. Ethan noticed she discreetly saved a small piece of bread in her pocket, likely for later, an instinct of someone who doesn't know when the next meal will come. "My mom died 4 months ago," she said suddenly, staring at the remainder of her hot chocolate. "It was just the 2 of us always." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sorry." "She was a housekeeper, worked in big homes, like the ones you probably own," Sophie continued, her voice quiet but steady. "She always said she'd give me a better life. She put me in school, bought me books when she could, did everything so I could learn. Said education was the one thing nobody could take away from me." Ethan listened, absorbing every word. "When she got sick, she kept working, even when she was too weak to clean properly. We had no money for good doctors. By the time we got a spot in the public hospital, it was too late." The bluntness with which she described her personal tragedy clashed with the evident pain in her eyes, like someone who had grown up too fast, forced to face realities no child should know. "After she died, some social workers took me to a shelter. It was crowded, noisy. Older kids stole our stuff, and the adults barely had time for everyone. I ran away after a week." "Did they try to find you?" Sophie shrugged. "Maybe, but there are so many kids on the streets. I'm just one more." The simplicity of her statement weighed on Ethan. To the world, she was just a number. To him, until a few days ago, she would have been just another anonymous face at a traffic light. Since then, I've managed. Some people help. The bakery lady, the bookstore owner, the fruit seller. I sleep wherever I can, always a different place. I do odd jobs, hand out those cards at traffic lights. And school. You can't go to school when you don't have a permanent address, she replied, as if it were obvious, or when you're worried about where you'll sleep at night. As Sophie recounted her story, Ethan felt something shifting inside him. For the first time, he wasn't listening with half his attention. thinking about emails to answer or contracts to review. He wasn't calculating how this conversation could benefit him. He was simply present, witnessing the pain and strength of a child who kept going despite all odds. "Do you know what my mom always said?" Sophie continued, now with a small smile. "She said that even in the worst situations, there's still kindness in the world. You just have to find the right person." That sentence hit Ethan unexpectedly. It was so simple, yet so profound, and somehow he felt that he needed to be that person for Sophie. "Sophie," he said, surprised at the firmness in his own voice, "I can't change what happened to you. I can't bring your mom back, but I can offer you a safe place to stay, at least for now." The offer hung between them. Sophie looked at him with a mixture of hope and distrust. Why? What do you get out of it? A valid question, one he wasn't sure he could fully answer. "Maybe I need this as much as you do," he said honestly. "Maybe I need to remember there's more to life than work and money." Sophie kept studying him, her gaze far older than it should be for her age. "Do you have a big house?" she finally asked. "I have a pretty spacious apartment," he answered, surprised by the change of subject. "With a spare room?" "Yes, a few." Sophie nodded slowly. "Can I leave whenever I want?" "Of course. It's not a prison. What if it doesn't work out? What if I don't like it, or you don't like me?" Her practical worry, so adult in nature, made Ethan's heart ache again. "Then we'll find another solution. Together. But I won't just send you back to the streets." Sophie went silent for a long moment. Finally, she extended her small dirty hand across the table. "Okay, but it's temporary, just to see how it goes." Ethan took her hand, feeling a mix of relief and enormous responsibility. He had just made a decision that would change both of their lives and, he hoped, for the better. Deal. Temporary. He paid the bill, leaving a generous tip that made the owner's eyes widen. As they left, the woman grabbed Ethan's arm. "Take good care of her," she whispered, half warning, half plea. "I will," he promised, with a conviction he had never felt before. On the way to the car, Sophie walked beside him, still cautious but with a small glimmer of hope in her eyes. Ethan realized he had just taken on a responsibility for which he had no preparation. He didn't know how to care for a child. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something genuinely important. Ethan's apartment seemed even bigger through Sophie's eyes. On that first day, she walked cautiously through the rooms, as if afraid of breaking something or leaving marks on the spotless floor. Her eyes grew wide at every detail: the paintings on the walls, the leather sofas, the huge TV in the living room, the sweeping view of the city from the panoramic window. "This will be your room," Ethan said, opening the door to one of the guest rooms. It was a spacious, elegant space, decorated in neutral tones like the rest of the apartment, impersonal but comfortable. Sophie stepped inside hesitantly, her worn backpack looking out of place against the sophisticated decor. "Can I really stay here?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. "Of course, it's all yours." She touched the king-size bed with her fingertips, as if testing its reality. "I've never slept in a bed this big." That first night, Ethan discovered he had no idea what a child needed for dinner. His fridge only held leftover gourmet takeout and some fruit. They ended up ordering pizza, which made Sophie's eyes light up momentarily. "Eat as much as you want," he said when he noticed her taking only a small slice. "I'm saving the rest for tomorrow," she replied matter-of-factly. The statement hit him like a punch. She still thought like someone who had to secure the next meal. "Sophie, you don't have to store food here. We'll always have more." She studied him with wary eyes, but nodded slightly. In the following mornings, Ethan realized his meticulously planned schedule had been completely disrupted. He could no longer leave at 6:30 a.m. for the office after a quick workout and breakfast. Now he had to prepare breakfast for two, make sure Sophie had what she needed for the day, and coordinate times to get back home. His first attempt at scrambling eggs resulted in a burnt mess that made Sophie stifle a laugh. The first genuinely happy